Now, as a part of our duty is to continue to remember and teach and learn, and when you talk about the impact on next generations, our keynote speaker this year really embodies and reflects the generations of sacrifice and service. He's here to talk about how the events of 9/11 affected his life and his family. I would ask us here in San Diego that we give a rousing and warm welcome to FDNY firefighter from Rescue Company number 2, James Dowdell. James, thank you for being here. We welcome you to the stage and we appreciate you.
Thank you, Nathan. I'd first like to say a very special thank you to Firefighters Aid for including me in this remarkable day. Just knowing there are people on the other side of this country who take the time to remember each and every first responder means so much to me and my family. And all the effort you put into training and fundraising for such an important cause is truly humbling. It is a pleasure to be here with you and share with all of you my experience on 9/11 and the years following. Remembering our fallen and honoring their sacrifice, like Nathan said, is our duty as Americans. Making sure that these men and women did not die in vain is a heavy burden that we all carry. But by showing up here, climbing 110 flights of stairs, and talking about those who were murdered on 9/11, you're remembering them and ensuring their place in history. For that, my family and I sincerely thank you. On September 11th, I was a senior in high school on 16th Street in Lower Manhattan. I had just turned 17 the day before on September 10th, and I was coming into what I believe to be the best years of my life. I was fully prepared to enjoy all the perks that go along with being a senior in high school. It was first period, I was sitting in class, and an announcement came over the loudspeaker to tell the teachers to lock their doors and close all the windows. In a pre-9/11 world, this was just not the norm. We all just assumed it was a sort of drill. Shortly after that announcement, another announcement came over asking anyone who had family working in the Wall Street area to come to the library. My father, Kevin Dowdell, was a lieutenant in Rescue 4 in Queens at the time, so I didn't really think twice about him being in Lower Manhattan that morning. But once the news started trickling in and we got word that 2 planes had hit the World Trade Center, I started to think that maybe my father and his men would be there. Rescue 4 is one of the 5 rescue companies that falls under the Special Operations Command in the FDNY. There is 1 rescue company in each of the 5 boroughs that make up New York City. On major events in the past, the city has sent all 5 rescue companies to respond to major emergencies, like the World Trade Center bombing in '93 and the Father's Day fire in 2001. I'm not sure I really grasped what was occurring outside that classroom just a few blocks away. The entire world was about to be changed forever. Being in New York City that day was absolute chaos. And since I was in high school, I had to be signed out, so I started calling my mother, Rosellen. She was a public school teacher in Brooklyn, and her telephone in the classroom was not working. Once I got through to her, she told me all the bridges and tunnels were closed, and that we had a family friend in Manhattan coming to meet me. The only way out of New York City that day was by boat. So we got on the Staten Island ferry and headed to her house. I assumed that my father would get off work the next day and come pick me up. My father had over 21 years of experience, all in very busy companies in the FDNY, and he always came home, so today wasn't going to be any different. On September 12th, I finally got home. I was able to cross the bridges, and I walked into our house, and my mother was there waiting. She told me that my brother Patrick was on his way home from college, and that we had not heard from my father. Over the course of that week, every time the door opened, we all turned and expected to see him walking in. As each day passed, we knew the likelihood of him coming home through that door was less and less. At this point, my mother had the job of telling her 2 sons that their father was never going to come home. My mother made it clear that even though our lives had just changed forever, one thing was not going to change. We were going to be held to the same standard we were held to when Dad was alive. We were expected to act accordingly. This meant no slacking in school, no feeling sorry for yourselves, and no excuses. I look back on this pivotal conversation with my mother, and I think about how incredibly strong she was at this moment. She was setting the tone for what would dictate our new way of life, our new normal. Now that I have two boys of my own, I can only imagine the courage it took to have this conversation. The members of the FDNY worked tirelessly in the months following 9/11. They were going from the World Trade Center to a firehouse to the funeral. It was a vicious cycle, and it seemed like it was never going to end. These men and women worked like this for the next 8 months, all trying to accomplish the same goal, which is to bring everyone home, recover the bodies, so that the families could have some sort of closure. My brother and I were fortunate enough to work down at the World Trade Center site and see firsthand the emotional and tedious task every first responder faced while they were sifting through the debris. This was thanks to members of Rescue 4, including Bill Murphy and Liam Flaherty. Liam is here with me today and now my captain in Rescue 2. There were continuous shifts every day, from 9/11 until the site closed in May of 2002. It was another experience that my brother and I shared with them as being welcomed into the FDNY Pipes and Drums, often playing multiple funerals a day. Becoming a member of the band, in addition to being part of the recovery at the site, is something I look back on and take pride in for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, after countless man-hours and hard work, my father's body was never recovered. We held his memorial service on April 20th, 2002. In true fire department fashion, he got the send-off he deserved. With thousands of uniformed members in attendance, the FDNY Pipe Band outside the church, and my brother playing a solo of Amazing Grace on his bagpipes. 5 months after my father's service, I started the first year at Iona College, and my brother started his first day at the United States Military Academy at West Point. Having been waitlisted the year before, Patrick's persistence paid off. He was the first class into West Point after 9/11, a class ready to go to war, get revenge, and combat the people who did this to our family, our city, and our country. Patrick was commissioned as an officer in the Army in 2006, which is the same year I was appointed to Ladder 174 with the FDNY. It was a time to celebrate in our family. Patrick and I were both fulfilling our lifelong dreams. Our mother could not have been prouder. I'm sure she'll tell you that there were some sleepless nights during this time. Patrick did his 5 years in the Army, serving year-long deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He's currently raising a family a few doors down from where I raised mine. It's truly a blessing to have my brother and my mother so close. A few years ago, I got into Rescue 2 in Brooklyn, which is where my father was a fireman for 8 years before he got promoted to lieutenant. It's a surreal feeling that I get to work in the same firehouse as he did. I have pictures of me holding my kids in front of the same door my father held my brother and I 30 years ago. 9/11 was the worst day in many people's lives, including our own. But it's created a lot of friendships and a lot of bonds that hold strong to this day. I know several other firemen that lost their fathers on 9/11, and they're following their father's footsteps, putting on the same FDNY uniform with pride. It's a true honor for me to stand here in this uniform that my father and so many others died for. Unfortunately, members from our department are still dying from illnesses and cancers in record numbers due to their exposure of World Trade Center toxins in the months following 9/11. It is our job to take care of these members who didn't think twice about working for months in the recovery effort. That is why it is important for members of the fire service to have access to doctors and tests to make sure we can take care of ourselves, not just become another cancer statistic. I encourage all department members to make sure you take the time to stay on top of your own health so that you can perform your best and enjoy the years of hard work with your retirement. Every September 11th, we are fortunate enough to honor my father and the many firemen he worked with at the companies he worked in. In the morning, my whole family goes to Rescue 4, where they host a breakfast for the families who lost their loved ones. They perform services, including moments of silence, during all the major attacks that happened that morning. In the afternoon, we go to Rescue 2 for Mass and lunch. At both firehouses, we reflect, share stories, and teach our children about the events that happened that day and the sacrifices made by the heroes we lost. In the evening, we go home for dinner, pour a glass of my father's favorite red wine, and take a sip as we toast all the positives in our life that he would be so proud of. It is a tradition our family has done over these years and will continue to do. I know my father is happy, smiling down on my wife and my children and I. happy for the life that we have built. It's an honor to be here with all of you today, and I look forward to climbing these stairs and honoring our fallen. May we never forget. May God bless all of you, our first responders, and God bless America.
Thank you, James. I don't think there are any words to describe a family and the multiple generations of service and sacrifice. And James, all I can tell you is everyone here in San Diego today is climbing for your dad, is climbing for your mom, is climbing for you, for your boys and your brother. And we appreciate you being here. James doesn't tell his story often. This is only the second time he's talked about it. And let's show our appreciation for everything that KNY did.